I'm Robert Wilonsky, the Communications Director here at Heritage Auction. And this is a very special thing we're doing here because we hadn't planned on doing this live. I'm with Joe Maddalena, the Executive Vice President of Heritage Auctions, formerly of Profiles in History. And Joe is the man responsible for everything we're about to see in this room, which is pretty much the most all-star auction, Hollywood memorabilia auction in the history of Heritage Auctions.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an honor, first of all, to be doing this and being at Heritage.
It's an honor to really be with me, is what you're trying to say. It's hard to get it.
This guy is so famous.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh my God.
You've reminded me plenty of times how famous you are. So, look, one of the things we're doing here is, and look, this is a very special event because, again, we were just going to do kind of a social media video, chop it up, and show you some really good highlights from this auction room. But the fact is, everything's a highlight, and we said, well, preview it to the folks who are watching it live and watching it on YouTube later on.
But, you know, that's the coolest part because people always say to me, oh, who collects this stuff?
Right.
And I can always get somebody to finally admit they have a favorite movie. And you start breaking it down and they're like, oh, yeah, I would like to have that. There's always something. And that's where people start to like, oh, I'd like to collect. Like, this is such...
All right, wait. Right. So, yes, I have like 50 favorite movies in this room. And this is one of them. This is one of the great American comedies of all time. This is Dustin Hoffman's Dress from Tootsie. But that said, we should say when the sale is, you know, since after all, that's what we're here to promote. So July 16th to July 18th.
July 16th, 17th, and 18th. And it's multiple sales. Day 1 is Hollywood. Day 2 is music. And day 3 is non-floor sessions. So if you're interested in anything Hollywood music, I mean, you know, we have everything. The Willis O'Brien estate, amazing letters from Bruce Lee, never seen before, and just literally guitars. Elton John's piano. Oh my God, I forgot about that. You can buy the piano, then go to the concert.
It's the touring piano that used from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's the piano that was played during the 1974 Thanksgiving show that was John Lennon's last concert. And Freddie Mercury used it on the Night at the Opera tour.
Live Aid.
That's right. It was also used in Live Aid.
That piano, millions of people, billions of people saw that piano. It's the most famous piano in Elton's career, and the piano is amazing because it was originally black, then it was painted white, it was stripped down. We have a letter from Steinway documenting the piano saying this is the piano delivered to Elton John. He specifically took on tour all over the world because he got used to playing one piano and was very particular about the action and stuff. So it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own his piano.
So let's start here, and we're going to walk around this room. Tommy, do you want to show folks kind of what a preview of what they're about to see? Because this is an extraordinary. I brought like every employee in Heritage in here just to see it, and every one of them says the same thing. It's like a museum. Oh my God, I can't believe I work at a place where I can go touch Marilyn Monroe's bus stop dress. But that said, this, of course, is Dustin Hoffman's dress as Dorothy Michaels from Tootsie, the one that's seen in the big montage in the film, halfway through the film, and certainly the one that graced the poster in the DVD and all the other stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing about, like, people always ask, what is valuable? And I always say it's a moment in a film. It's a moment in a TV show that sticks with you forever. And when you watch Tootsie, forever you'll remember this dress. I mean, it is the movie. It is like, it's the moment you remember. It's just like so over the top. But it is culturally, it's important. You know, it's just part of our society. Everybody can look at this and say, oh my God, I remember when. They have a story. And that's what it's all about. That's why film is so important. It's such an important medium. It connects everybody on the planet together.
Right. It's not just a piece of fabric. It's the person who wore it. It's the moment you saw it. It's the moment that this movie meant. One of Sidney Pollack's greatest films. I mean, This really is an American touchstone.
And that's all these costumes and props are, is they represent important moments in the history of, you know, movies and television shows. And when you get into this iconic stratosphere of things that are instantly recognizable, all you have to do is go and you look, oh my God, Tootsie. Right. That's all it is. And that's what people collect and that's what people want. And that's why we have some amazing things in this room.
Let me just say, too, for folks who are watching, there's a little banging going on. We're soundproofing, ironically enough, the auction gallery. And the process of soundproofing while we're making a video is extraordinarily loud. So
that means bigger previews, more stuff, more auctions. Heritage.
That's right. That's why we're in this room, because next time we'll be in the big room. I have to say, I love being in this room. There's something intimate and extraordinary just about having all this stuff next to each other, like John Travolta's leather jacket as Tony Manero from Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah, this has got an amazing story. So the consigner of this, it was actually his coat. He's an extra. He's on set, and they're shooting, and Travolta's wearing a different leather jacket. The director's like, I just don't like the jacket. You know, it's just like it's not working on him. Whatever they had used, the director just didn't like. And he went, "Hey, kid, what size are you?"
Right.
The guy stood up. He's like, "John, put this on." Travolta wore this, and this is the jacket. And then he gave it back to the guy, and the guy went home. So this is literally a piece of clothing that became immortal. Just, I mean, can you imagine being there on set and just, here, take the jacket, and now one of the most famous scenes in a movie.
And he's so tiny.
Tiny.
People walk in here and go, that can't be real because he's so tiny.
Tiny. It's cool though. But I mean, rarely do you get things like this. Most things in Hollywood are multiples of. So by the time they were making movies like this, you know, if this was today, there'd be 10 of these.
Right.
Okay, you know, for multiple reasons. The fact that it's the one and only, it's priceless.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Speaking of priceless, it's not often that you see an Academy Award in an auction. In fact, it's not allowed if the Academy Award was after 1951.
You know, it's a complicated set of rules. I mean, it's 1950s, the cutoff pretty much, and then it becomes a matter of if you won one in like 1972, it kind of taints the earlier one. So it's a complicated world we navigate in. Yeah.
You know more about this stuff than I do.
But what's important about this truly is like we use the word important a lot, right? And I try to like not because it's overused. This is important. This is Willis O'Brien. Okay, you think about
the father of the modern blockbuster.
The father of the modern blockbuster. Everybody from Spielberg to Lucas. You know, there would have been no Ray Harryhausen without Willis O'Brien.
Absolutely.
And it's an amazing story because Willis O'Brien in the 1920s is kind of floundering. He's trying to get these movies made in Hollywood, and he's having a really hard time. He had all of these amazing films, and they kept getting scrapped, and there just wasn't the budget, right? And there wasn't this interest in stop motion. So when Marion C. Cooper was making King Kong, they reached out to O'Brien to come in because O'Brien already had puppets for creation made.
Right, he'd been doing different stop motion with dinosaurs.
Yes, and he repurposed the puppets for King Kong. And what people don't understand is like, you're talking about a time, this is stop motion. If you look at how good that movie holds up today, we know King Kong obviously isn't real, but the technology, considering everything was done by hand, frame by frame, every movement of that armature, they had to shoot, stop. I mean, for King Kong to go up the Empire State Building must have taken 3 days. But if you think about that, what's amazing here is we have Willis O'Brien's collection. We have his key book from King Kong. These are the actual photographs he used on set as reference. No computers. They had to have a book with him. So for continuity's sake, he'd have to look at a scene and remember, okay, Kong is doing this. This is what's in the scene. That's amazing. Willis O'Brien was given an Academy Award for King Kong. He actually turned it down. He wanted every member of his crew to also get an Academy Award, and the Academy said no. And he's like, I don't want it then. And he just literally walked away. It probably drastically affected his career. He had a hard time working after that, but amazing that a man like that would not take it on his own. And it was later, you know, when he did Mighty Joe Young, that he finally did win an Academy Award. And his speech is classic. He gets up there, thank you, and he goes down. Willis O'Brien was so understated, but I mean, this is truly once in a lifetime. We have art from all of the movies that he did, you know, before Kong, after Kong, his work with Ray Harryhausen. It's truly extraordinary.
Joe, how does something like this, I've shown this to 1 million people at this point. I've shown it in the catalog. I've shown it in person. How does something like this, King Kong, survive that long?
You know, my guess is O'Brien saved these things and they just probably went into a trunk, right? And they just sat there for decades. I mean, they just, you know, we didn't realize how important any of this was. There was no reason to save it. You know, nobody ever thought it would have value, God, let alone anybody would care, right? So it just kind of faded into obscurity, and probably just luck that it survived. I mean, most of this stuff got thrown away. I mean,
how they got through the lobby.
God,
what
is that?
Neither of us have a guest in the lobby. That's all that's important.
So I think that, you know, like, you just have to understand that Hollywood, the two most important things are the script and actually what you see on screen. Everything else is kind of like disposable waste. It wasn't meant to last. It wasn't meant to be what it is now. So it's a testament to just probably luck that these things survive.
Right.
And that's why I'm actually thrilled the Academy's built this amazing museum. My company was a benefit. We were a big contributor to the Academy. I helped the Academy get the ruby slippers, and
in fact, the Academy will see some of this stuff next week in Los Angeles, as a matter of fact.
yeah, the Academy, this is something that they are always interested in looking at, what we have, and adding pieces to the museum. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing.
So let's go from King Kong to Grandpa Munster. Al Lewis used to write a column for me in my college paper at the University of Texas. So,
I mean, I had met him a few times, and it's just like Butch Patrick is actually a really good friend, and just to hear the stories, just like that, Adam's Family Munsters. Like everybody picks their camp. It's kind of like Lost in Space and in Star Trek in the '60s. You were one or the other, right? But I was a Munsters guy, and Grandpa is just like, this is so cool. I mean, to have his cape. I mean, this is something that there may have only been one. The jackets have come up because he wore these constantly.
Right.
Okay, but the cape is something he wore pretty infrequently. And the way the cape was made, he's made by Western Costume Company in Los Angeles. This is truly, for television, actually TV artifacts from the 60s and 70s, early 70s, are much rarer than film artifacts. They just don't survive.
Right, because they were seen as more disposable.
And they went right back into rental stock.
Right.
So this stuff literally would have went from the Munster set back to Western to a Halloween rental. Literally, that's truly how this worked. I mean, I've worked with Western for years, and costumes would come in from just rentals, and they constantly go into labels. Oh, here's Clark Gable from Gone with the Wind. To this very day, they're finding stuff. Millions of costumes constantly go out, and a lot of it is rentals for other things other than television or movies.
Right.
Yeah,
it's kind of extraordinary. Speaking of extraordinary, we'll get to the close in just a minute, but this is obviously some Marilyn Monroe artifacts. This piece right here, the self-portrait, I think is one of the most extraordinary things I've seen during my year and some odd months at Heritage. It was painted by her. It's dated. It's signed Marilyn Monroe Miller, as a matter of fact. It was auctioned at a charity auction for children, the Children's Trust. It was auctioned by Laurence Olivier, with whom she was co-starring at the moment, right?
Yeah. So think about what you just said.
Yeah.
Laurence Olivier was the auctioneer, right?
Right.
I mean, think about that. Probably, the greatest actor who ever lived is auctioning off this. I mean, in a movie that was controversial. I mean, he didn't like working with Marilyn Monroe. I mean, it was a tough movie. I mean, I think she overshadowed him, and he couldn't deal with her being irresponsible because she was Marilyn Monroe. But it was a beautiful movie, but this was a really tough period of her time because this wasn't the ideal movie for her. But what you have in this case is people always ask me, why is Marilyn Monroe the most famous personality in film? I think she's one of the most famous people ever. I mean, her popularity grows. People want to emulate her. People love her style, and it's just like, I think that she just had this radiance about her that was bigger than life. When you see her on screen and she delivers dialogue, it's just magical. And the coolest thing is, my favorite thing, without question, is this is her shooting script from the 7-Year Itch. So just imagine Marilyn Monroe is sitting at home and she gets delivered this. And, there's all kind of notes, phone numbers, making dinner appointments. And of course, Marilyn is the girl. So she's coming to her script in the beginning of the movie. We don't meet her for a while. And then all of a sudden we're going along. And we all remember when we first meet Marilyn, here she is, the girl. Here I am. She's actually, what's fascinating about this, I was talking to somebody the other day and they were saying, why is it so important? I said, Norma Jean was an individual. Marilyn Monroe was a personality that Norma Jean turned into. This shows a transformation because the way Norma Jean is talking, she's explaining to herself how Marilyn would play the girl. So it's fascinating to read this. You're literally getting an insight into the very way she thought. I mean, she literally, and the amount of effort that she put into every single thing. Here's a note, Monroe, Mrs. Nelson, to remind herself to do something. And each one of these, stay down, notes to herself of how she wanted to perform the role. Just look at the care and what she went into to create this character. And of course, what does this screenplay have? the most important single scene in film history, the subway scene. In this script, she talks about how she's going to play the most famous scene in movie history. And I mean, I can't imagine what could be any more important than this. You know, if you are into a fan of Marilyn Monroe, you really wanted to have something that was personal of nature, that is her defining moment in film. I mean, to me, this is it. This is, I think, the holy grail of Marilyn Monroe. And what do you like?
The self-portrait. I mean, that really, I'll be honest, the self-portrait is really one of the pieces that sticks out. This is a letter to her acting coach, to Chekhov, in which she asks him for patience because she was always late. She was notoriously late to acting meetings. But that said, she envisioned herself as being a serious and great actor.
Absolutely. She worked with the Strasbergs and Chekhov. But dear Mr. Chekhov, please don't give up on me yet. I know, painfully so, that I try your patience. I need the work and your friendship desperately. I shall call you soon. Love, Marilyn Monroe. If this doesn't sum up Marilyn Monroe, I don't know what does. This is the battle that everybody faced working with her. She was this tortured soul who everybody wanted to make better, but you didn't have to. She was Marilyn Monroe. And when you worked with her and you saw the end product, it was magic. She would come on a scene and even Laurence Olivier became invisible. And I think that's something that was hard for anybody who worked with her to deal with, because the other side of her was very difficult for her to get into character. But this really sums it up. I mean, if you wanted, again, something of personal nature, don't give up on me. It's amazing.
That's also referenced, I believe, in her self-published,
yeah,
it was a posthumously published autobiography that
Yes.
she was working on at the time of her death.
Yeah, this is published. This is published.
Right.
I mean,
That's my favorite. I think that, I mean, that says everything you kind of need to know about her, how she saw herself.
Yeah,
I think that's an extraordinary piece.
And you know,
And that's from the Gene London collection.
yes.
And Gene got it from the guy who bought it from the auction, which was hey,
We don't let anybody see that.
if only we weren't live.
That's the comic department. You don't have to worry about that part.
Yeah, at least that's slab, so that's good to go. We'll move away from this case now, and let's go over to the costumes because it's much harder to. So look, I'm just going to say this, and then I'm going to let you talk. But the fact is that I'm in a room, not just with this, certainly Mutiny on the Bounty piece, but two of the most important American films ever are represented literally within inches of each other, with Charlie Chaplin and Citizen Kane, the great dictator in Citizen Kane. That to me is just...
And Marlon Brando from Mutiny on the Bounty. If you think about, like, when the lights are off and, you know, we're at night at the museum and he's come to life, what a room this would be. You have Brando, Orson Welles, Charlie Chaplin. I mean,
Grace Kelly and all the other ones we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah, but stick with the men for a second and just realize the breadth of what you have. The greatest comedian that ever lived. I mean, a genius.
Well, we'll argue about that when we get to the across the room.
Back to the greatest comedian that ever lived, who literally created an industry. People don't realize how important he was in the history of creation of film. You know, Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, they started the studios. I mean, these monumentally important. And then Citizen Kane, I mean, so groundbreaking. I mean, this is Orson Welles. This is at its absolute zenith.
It's the greatest film ever made.
Yeah, and it really is. And I mean, his performance, and again, the fact that you can own something like this, and people always say, how do you get these things? Okay, again, this came from Western Costume Company. I found this one day on a rack, okay? And then we go through, and these costumes, you know.
Yeah, talk about how you match it, because...
Okay, so the costumes are labeled. Orson Welles. So we have a starting point. So when I was at Western Costume, we found a rack of Welles costumes because they made all of these. So then it becomes literally a lot of detective work. You go through, you look at the period costume and you say, okay, it's impossible, it's the wrong style, and you start narrowing it down. Then literally you watch frame by frame to figure out what scene it's in. And there it is. And then you match up every single detail. You don't miss anything. And then you start matching up the lines. We will actually count how many rows to make sure it's that one, because they made more than one. So the amount of energy that goes into not only authenticating one of these, but to matching it, it's a lot of work. But if you wanted something where you can say, that's my jacket, that's pretty cool. You know, I mean, and then, so this is the male kind of thing, but, like the females are going to outshine the males any day of the week.
So these come from the Gene London collection. We should say that he was he was a TV show host in Philadelphia in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Beloved.
Yeah, Gene London was an amazing human being, a collector extraordinaire, a dear friend for many, many years, and had a great eye. And just the thing about Gene was he was a costume designer, and he loved nothing more than showing the costumes and exhibiting them. I've watched video after video of people coming up to him during his exhibits, and the amount of joy that he instilled in people. It's amazing, and that's what this is all about. People like Debbie Reynolds, people like Gene London that had the vision to save these things, because it wasn't about the money, it's because of the importance, and he wanted to share these with the world. Sadly, Gene passed away, and we're very close with the family and John Thomas, and they made a decision that certain things would be sold in order for them to keep the collection going forever, so it can be exhibited around the world. So we selectively decided what would be the best pieces so the collection could stay intact, and that's what this is all about. And they decided to part with Grace Kelly from The Swan, Joan Crawford, Mildred Pierce.
An Oscar-winning dress right there.
You got Grace Kelly, Joan Crawford, and my favorite thing in the entire auction, Marilyn Monroe from Bus Stop. This is so important. I can't understate how important this costume is. There were a lot of these blouses and costumes made because there were multiple test sittings. They use this extensively in publicity, so it's very difficult to find one that's screen used. Again, we put hours of research in, matching up every single embroidery line, matching up every single stitch. This is a screen-worn costume, both pieces, all 20th Century Fox labeled to death. It's as good as it gets. And again, these came out of Fox. There was a point in time where Fox sold all the wardrobe. And Debbie Reynolds and Gene and Michael Short, the collector, went in and bought all the Marilyn Monroe. Gene was lucky to get Bus Stop, and he was lucky to get 7-Year Itch.
And it wasn't just, we should say this, it wasn't just about buying it to have it. It was about buying it to save it, buying it for the stories that it told. And as you said, Gene traveled the world with these exhibits. And he took these all over the world. He had 60,000 pieces at one point. And as John says, it's just very hard at some point to take care of every single one of these pieces, because they do deserve, obviously, incredible care and storage, and it's just a hard thing to take care of.
And they also need to be seen.
Right.
Putting these in a closet and forgetting about them is not what they're about. So you got to go back in time for a second. It's 1970, and the studios are going through this massive renaissance. The day of the contract player is over, and the studios are in tough shape. I mean, MGM sells all their assets to raise money. Fox is dumping the back lot, which is basically Culver City and Century City now, and selling all the properties off. And Debbie Reynolds hears about this auction. She lived on the MGM lot as a little girl. Debbie Reynolds loved costumes, loved design. She went to this auction, and she couldn't believe they were selling the history of Hollywood, and bought everything she could buy. The next day, Hedda Harper writes a story and says, crazy Debbie Reynolds is at the MGM auction spending all of her money. No one could understand. And working with Debbie and talking to her many times, she'll be the first to tell you, she was not a collector. She did this to preserve the history of Hollywood.
She was an archivist.
Yeah, she really, to her last day on Earth, I would assume and believe that she wanted nothing more than a museum, to take place. And thankfully, thank God, there's finally one built, an amazing museum in Los Angeles, the Academy. You get to go and see the ruby slippers. So now there's two, the Smithsonian and the Academy, so people from all over the world will be able to see these things. But this is what it's about. It's preserving Hollywood, because without people like Debbie, without people like Gene London, without these visionaries, this stuff just wouldn't exist. I mean, it would all be gone, and we wouldn't be doing this.
We should also mention, by the way, that Madonna wore this in 1991 in Vanity Fair.
Yes.
And in that story, the headline of which was The Misfit, obviously a reference to Marilyn Monroe's final film. And she also won on the cover of the Truth or Dare poster. Yeah,
so her team reached out. They knew Gene London had this costume, and they reached out and asked if Madonna could wear it. And Gene, gracious as he was, said sure. Showed up, let her do the shoot, took his costume home. So it's kind of got like two very famous blondes.
And speaking of, I'm fascinated by the Wizard of Oz dress because this obviously is not the one that was used in the final film, but it was used during the first 2 weeks of shooting before
Yes.
Victor Fleming came on as the director
Yes.
because nobody liked the original version of what Dorothy looked like.
Well, the Wizard of Oz, the start of production, it just couldn't find its way. They really weren't sure what the witch was supposed to look like. They had different ideas about that. They had different ideas if Dorothy should be a blonde. You know, they weren't sure about. There were just a lot of things where the movie just was not progressing, and they scrapped it. And they did the smartest thing they could ever do. They hired Gilbert Adrian, and he came in, and the rest is history. And they built the most amazing costumes, told this amazing story. But during this process, there was a lot of back and forth about what Dorothy, Judy, would look like. So here is Judy Garland in this very costume. So we have test photos, 3 of them for sure, that show her wearing this. And there were multiple test costumes, but this one got pretty far along in the process to actually get to that stage where she's in full makeup. And they're still figuring out her hair. You know, because if you watch The Wizard of Oz, there's not a lot of continuity. Long hair, short hair. Her hair goes up and down a lot throughout the movie, right? So for being in Oz for maybe 10 minutes, we don't know. I mean, she had a lot of different hairdos.
Well, it's Oz. The inexplicable happens there.
Right. It's a time warp. But you can see the genesis of the gingham dress because the one thing that kind of always the costumers were wrestling with was the gingham. So you could see the evolution where it went from kind of this plain thing to where. And they kept the band. This was a consistent thing. So when you see the final costume, this is there. All of this pattern is there. It became basically kind of the reverse where the dress became gingham. And then they changed this. But the construction of the dress really didn't change. The blouse is pretty much identical to what you wore on screen. And again, it's just an important part of the story. You know, it's just an important part of Hollywood's history to have something that Judy Garland wore in The Wizard of Oz. I mean, it's amazing.
Right. Tell us what's behind you.
So somebody
Like you need to.
Well, it's funny because the other day somebody said, "Who's that?" And I was like, "That's Marilyn Monroe before Marilyn Monroe." And they're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "This is Jean Harlow." And they're like, "Who?" I'm like, this was Marilyn Monroe before Marilyn Monroe. Jean Harlow in the 20s was the most famous actress in the world. She was, look at her, she was stunning. George Hurrell was the most famous photographer who ever lived. He was her favorite subject, you know, and sadly she died at 31, a very young age. And, you know, her, you know, films aren't watched so much anymore, but anybody who's a history of, you know, Hollywood, fan of Hollywood, this is George Hurrell's custom print that was in the first edition of the portfolios that he made. This is an elephant-size edition, and it's the famous bear rug. It probably is the most famous photograph in Hollywood history. This is, you look at this, and this is Hollywood.
I'm very excited to get to the glass booth to your right.
The second best comedian who ever lived.
Well,
Going over here now.
Look, I'm appreciative, deeply appreciative of Charlie Chaplin. As a film scholar, as a film student, as a former film critic, I certainly am not going to sit there and say Charlie Chaplin isn't one of the most important people in the history of Hollywood for any number of reasons. But I have seen every Marx Brothers film, even the bad ones, and there were a few, 100 times.
Yeah.
I've seen the Big Store maybe too many times. But look, I never imagined that I would one day work in a place where Groucho Marx's glasses were within.
It's unbelievable,
reach.
right?
Those are from the MGM years, correct?
Yes.
Those are from the At the Circus, Go West, The Big Store, Night at Casablanca.
All the movies you
Yeah.
want. I mean, it's just like, again, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. These came directly from the family. Our consignor was fortunate enough to be very close to the family. And, you know, just little things like, you know, Groucho's AFTRA card.
And a wallet that was gifted to him on his last birthday.
But think about that. I mean, this is his AFTRA card and his wallet. I mean, it's not like, you know, this is Groucho Marx. I mean, we start to, you know, I get a little jaded at times, but you know, obviously the Marx Brothers, comedic geniuses. I mean,
and we should talk about the fact that there's a photo album here that's photos from Horse Feathers and Monkey Business. This photograph right here of Harpo is with
Amelia Earhart,
extraordinary.
of all people.
Yeah.
And it just shows how important these characters were, where somebody, like the Marx Brothers weren't visiting Amelia Earhart. Amelia Earhart was visiting the Marx Brothers, just to put this in perspective, okay? So, But what's great is you have Groucho's key book. So people that don't know what key books are, when they would shoot a movie or a personal sitting, there would be continuity photographs of the best ones, usually not any outtakes sometimes. And they would present them to the principal actor or producer or director, and they would select what they thought would go into publicity. So this is Groucho's key book that he kept his entire life to show you how important he thought it was, because it's part of his legacy with his family. And then you have things like this. I mean, look at how early this photograph is.
And the one above it is well to the left.
And these were in his house. I mean, this was on the wall in his house. And, you know, his humidor, I mean, it's incredible.
His signed humidor.
But the best thing in this archive are the series of 200 letters that chronicle his entire career. The content is incredible.
They were written to his daughter Miriam.
Yes.
They're some of them, not all of them, are contained in the book Love Groucho.
Yeah, a good chunk. But again, it's very unusual to get source material of this quantity where you literally are buying a chunk of Groucho's life. These letters chronicle everything he did from the beginning until later in life. But again, a once in a lifetime opportunity where you have literally a piece of Groucho right to his, you know, I mean, look at this, a day at the races. I mean, he wore this coat in special appearances, but I mean, this is Groucho Marx.
That's the Hugo Z. Hackenbush jacket.
That's right. I mean, it's again, we're really fortunate, you know, in coming to Heritage and working and bringing this department here. You know, one of the things that is important to me is to bring people this diversity and the quality that my company, Profiles in History, had built for 35 years. And this is more about having a constant retrospective of Hollywood, whether it's film or television, for everybody. Because the one thing that I've always took pride in building auctions where I have scripts, I have costume sketches, I have design sketches, I have set designs, we have costumes, we have props from all time periods. It's not just we're the sci-fi company. To me, it's like I want to represent the entire history of this amazing field. And that's what really this is. And
yeah, let's talk about these Bruce Lee letters.
You know,
I know these hold a very dear place for you.
I've been in business 35 years, counting this year 36 years. My parents were Antique Dealers for 45 years. So I've been doing this my entire life. Bruce Lee, I would say in my entire career, and I was the largest autograph dealer in the world for decades before I even began selling movie props. I mean, I maybe have handled 3 or 4 letters in my entire career, and that's not for lack of trying. They don't exist. When this cachet of letters was offered to us, you know, we were shocked, and there were a lot of people like, well, we got to make sure they're real. Well, you know, they are 100% real, but we went through all the steps just to make absolutely certain. We went to PSA, and
I appreciate that because I was one of the people who said, "Oh, hey man, what's
Bob was nudging. How do you know these letters are real?" I'm like, "It's me, dude. What are you doing? Come on!" But we went through the extra step.
Journalists are such a pain in the ass. So we got the Bruce Lee letters, which is extraordinary all on its own. Nunchucks, got some weapons, the claw.
Yeah, it's like you've got.
Those are actually terrifying, by the way.
Yeah, and you've got, you know, like things from, you know, his Kung Fu school, you know, different photographs in the time period, you know, just a lot of really interesting things besides the letters. And there's a series of letters from Linda Lee also, you know, the chronicling this time period of Bruce's life right up to the end of his life.
So we go from Bruce Lee and a couple of his weapons of choice to quite the arsenal here and in the case behind you. Look, I never imagined that I'd one day work at a place where Mark Hamill's lightsaber from Return of the Jedi happened to be, or the Aliens pulse rifle, the Colonial Marines pulse rifle. Everything in here I have seen, whether it's The Mandalorian, certainly Return of the Jedi, Aliens 100 times.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you get into like now where the bulk of collecting is.
Yeah.
So now we're crossing the bridge. I would say Bruce Lee is the start of it, where now the collector start multiplying.
Well, that's an interesting, so you raise a really interesting point. Before we get to this stuff, I'm kind of fascinated. Is the collector of Marilyn Monroe's dress or Groucho Marx's glasses significantly different from the collector of a Mark Hamill lightsaber?
Yes, significantly different.
Yeah.
Now, I would say that almost all collectors would appreciate that and would say it was important. I don't think there'd be any debate about what those are.
Right.
but collecting interests constantly change. I hate to say this, but W.C. Fields, there's almost no market for. You'd be shocked.
Really?
Yeah, Fatty Arbuckle, you couldn't give them away. I mean, these are things that, like, you know, when I grew up, like, even kind of Humphrey Bogart's kind of fading into obscurity.
So, the Groucho Marx glasses. Somebody asked me the other day, what will they go for? I said, well, they should go for $1 billion, because as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the most top 10 iconic things in Hollywood. And everyone's like, you know, the lightsaber is going to sell for 10 times more than Groucho's glasses.
Probably. I mean, it's just like, you know, so I've had, this will be the second pair of Groucho glasses I sold from the family, same exact source. The first pair I sold for $85,000, which is, I think, a very respectable price.
Mm-hmm.
I think these are starting at $20,000. But again, you're talking about generational, where, you know, the people who are collecting now in their 30s and 40s, although they would respect the past, they want Kylo Ren. They want Sigourney Weaver.
They want pop culture items that they see on television every single day.
But they want their, it's more than that. They
Well,
want their nostalgia.
Oh, absolutely.
They want
I
what
get
they
it.
grew up with.
I've seen Jedi a billion times. I saw it in the theater. I've loved it since the moment it came out. I couldn't wait for it. I waited in line for it. And the ability to own a piece of it is certainly an extraordinary thing to even comprehend.
Absolutely. I remember being a little kid, and the Wizard of Oz would come on once a year, to come on around Thanksgiving, and literally you were glued to the TV. Because if you missed 30 seconds, it was a year. I mean, it was like some of these, like The Grinch, it would be a year. So it was like, so nostalgically, we grew up with these things. They're
soundproofing the room next door. Just
It's
remember,
woodpeckers. Heritage has animatronic woodpeckers they use for security. Don't tell anybody. They're
Remember,
all over. That's how we secure them.
To make it quiet, you gotta be loud.
Okay, so again, really cool things where a stormtrooper helmet
From The Mandalorian.
From The Mandalorian. This would have been something used in the background.
I mean, it's right there. It's using the pike.
Yeah, there would have been. So there would have been several of these. You know, and you know, it's very lightweight, a vacuum form. This is great because this is Kylo Ren, but this is the stunt double. So this is something that was worn in all the fighting scenes. So although it didn't make it on his head, the stuntman wore it, but it made it into all the crucial fighting scenes, which kind of like, you know, there's always a debate with these things. Would you rather have the fighting scenes or something that he wore in the foreground talking? But it is really,
I think if you
really
like
cool.
it, if you like Kylo Ren, if you like the last three films, you don't care who wore it. You just like the fact that it was in the film.
Yeah, you like the fact that it is, and the pulse rifle. So, you know, again, the thing about Hollywood is this is a background pulse rifle, meaning that it's non-functioning and it's static. Okay, so it's not a hero. A hero stun gun would have been a decommissioned machine gun that would have been made by Baptiste. That
Baptiste Armory, the company that made all this stuff. Yeah.
Baptiste did Star Wars and with the big armory in London, and they made the pulse rifles, or retrofitted the pulse rifles. So when you see something like this, it's something she would have worn, or him, or Sigourney Weaver, one of the Colonial Marines would have used when they were running around. You know, as soon as you get into a tight shot, they would have replaced them. They would have given them the heavy metal gun that weighs like 35 pounds. So when you're coming in close, they'll cut and give you a different weapon, like all of these things. Same thing with the lightsaber. This is a stunt. Now, where in the film this is exactly used is really hard to tell because he's moving around so much with these. It came from production, great provenance, but it's not a hero. Okay, the heroes are machine tool aluminum. This is a stunt. So this would have been something probably in running scenes, something would have hung off his belt, something that could have gotten wrecked and wouldn't have caused a problem. But again, when they're going into anything that's a close-up, they would have went to a hero, which would have been machine tooled aluminum, much better quality.
And there probably were several of those, because obviously they get dinged up in there all the time.
Well, you know, we're still in Star Wars, so this is still a movie that almost didn't get made.
Right.
So probably less, but by the time you get to Jedi, there's lots of everything.
Right.
You know, because they're realizing now that you got to make 10 of everything,
right.
20 of everything. So, you know, there's a different process.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated by him. Oh, and speaking of, you keep mentioning the hero version of the weapon. We do have a hero Star Trek original series phaser in this particular auction. We should mention that it's not here, it's in Beverly Hills, which I'm profoundly disappointed by because of all the things I've ever wanted to hold. It's an original hero phaser of which there are only 2 known surviving examples at the moment.
Exactly. So it's a principal phaser used in all of the close-ups. And, you know, there's a lot of speculation about how many of these were made, and there's one memo that exists where they're ordering 4 of them. Like anything else in these TV shows, I worked with Matt Jeffries, Herb Solow, Bob Justman, Leonard Nimoy, George Takei, so I was the pioneer of that genre of collecting, and I sold all their collections. I sold Matt Jeffries' collection, so I spent a lot of time with Matt Jeffries, who created everything for Star Trek.
Were you in a Jeffries tube?
I was never in a Jeffries tube, but I'll tell you what was cool was, so one day I'm with Matt and John Jeffries, they're brothers, and John was a set decorator and Matt was the main guy, and we're putting together stuff for the auction. And we're like brainstorming, what else can we find of value? And they're like, oh, we have some of the carpeting from the bridge. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah. So these guys had these little airplanes they used to fly on the weekends. They took the carpeting from the bridge and they used it for insulation in the airplanes. So we went and we ripped it out. It's like dollar ozite carpeting. So we had a 3 foot by 3 foot piece of carpeting in the Matt Jeffries auction. $200-300. Guess what it sold for?
50,000.
17,000. The most expensive carpet in the world. So, but I mean, it just shows you like the testament of the provenance. So when this gun came up, the most important collector in the field is Greg Jean, who he worked on all of the Star Trek movies, and he's the most knowledgeable, most important collector, and he has the other one. So we did a side-by-side comparison in person, literally analyzed every inch of this
down
thing.
to the guts.
Yeah, down to the guts, and literally interchange the pieces to see that they fit, they lock into each other. It's unquestionably real. Now people are like, oh, it doesn't really match, this picture. Yeah, because these things were reused, repainted, bashed around. There was no consistency. They didn't take these things and be like, oh, it's perfect, let's save it for tomorrow.
And it was a series that was almost canceled after the first season, after the second season.
79 episodes?
Yeah, I mean, they had by the time it was repainted, I think the series had already been canceled. And
yes.
The whole thing, the history of these props is just kind of extraordinary.
Well, the history of these props is one thing. There was no consistency.
Yeah.
Matt Jeffrey told me, we would talk about filming Star Trek all the time, and he would say, the budget was so low that when Spock would run down a hallway in Enterprise, the crew would be behind holding plywood, which were the walls of the Enterprise, and as Nimoy would run, they would fall. They would literally, the set would start to cave in on each other, because as soon as they shot something, they had to strike it, because another production was coming in. They didn't get to leave these sets up. So, I mean, just by the nature of Star Trek, it's a miracle, and then what did it become? This great cultural phenomenon.
Speaking of great cultural phenomenons, Steve McQueen.
The king of cool.
And this is one of his coolest jackets.
Well, I mean, when you get into Le Mans, you're now transcending. This is a bridge that brought in racing and film. McQueen was the ultimate guy. I mean, he was a racer. He rode motorcycles. He raced cars. He had, an original, GT. I mean, he was the guy. I mean, he just was. And making Le Mans is another movie that McQueen actually went in the hole for. Didn't get paid. And this was another movie that almost didn't get finished because it was a passion project for him. But it's that jacket. So you see this jacket, all the publicity photographs, you see the Gulf patch. I mean, this is a really important moment in auto racing and film history. But again, this crosses a genre into one of the biggest fields in the world, which is Le Mans, racing. I mean, this is very, very cool.
Joe Maddalena, you have a call holding.
Hey, you have a call holding.
Joe Maddalena.
Who would call me? Who knows I'm here? Oh, you do.
So that said, I have to say, when somebody buys this, does anybody wear it? You've done this for so long. You must know guys who buy jackets to wear them because they go around going, this is Steve McQueen's jacket.
Occasionally, I've even bought things and worn them.
Really? Like what?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you'll be like, oh, Halloween's coming. Here's $600. I can buy this cool costume from, I don't know, some B movie, and it's better than going and rent one. So
yeah, but this isn't going for $600.
I would hope you wouldn't wear this, but I mean, you could.
It's a durable jacket.
It's a real jacket. I would hope not. Probably not. I mean, I have tried this on.
No.
So I mean,
it's weird. I tried on the thing next to you, behind Sigourney Weaver.
Good on you, right?
Yeah.
A lot of Spanx.
Lots
of Spanx.
And Crisco.
A lot of Crisco. So, again, an epic defining moment in film history, the Terminator. We go from T1 to Cameron T2, and this character is created that's part of our society forever, the Terminator. And this is Schwarzenegger's jacket from T2. These are bullet holes. Inside would have been squibs, which are basically devices that they would fire that blood would come out of to simulate bullet holes. So there are very many versions of these costumes. This is a more distressed version. There are some that are crystal clear with no hits and no squibs, and there are others that are shot to pieces. So this is kind of a transitional jacket. Again, a really important piece of film history. I mean, I always tell people, like, these are the type of pieces that everybody wants.
Right.
They're kind of affordable. They're in the $20,000 range, but collectors come in, everybody wants a T2
Right.
jacket. Yeah.
And here at Heritage, we are proof that somebody does eventually put Ripley in the corner.
Yes.
Because there is, of course, Sigourney Weaver's outfit from Alien. That's the Nostromo patches on the side. It's astonishing, down to the height, down to the Converse All-Stars on the feet.
It's a lot of costumes after production gets stripped, and they'll take the patches off,
Yeah.
and they'll repurpose them. So the fact that somehow this survived production, because this is a off-the-shelf jumpsuit
Yeah.
that they then, decked out for the production. It's amazing they survive. I mean, some of these things, this is, it was a while ago, so it's amazing it survived.
1979.
Yeah. So again, the first two films, epic. Alien and Aliens. I mean.
Yeah, we have something from Alien and Aliens.
Yes.
Blows my mind. I mean, it really. I mean, this whole room. I mean, people who've seen that, what we've seen, and what we're about to see here.
But that's what we talked about. There's something for everybody in all of these.
Let me have my glasses. We're not auctioning those off.
In all of these, fields. So now we're into probably the most popular, contemporary, coolest, and to me, of all of this genre, there's nothing cooler than Mr. Fusion. I mean, come on, we could fire that baby up, put a banana in, and we're off. We're at Back to the Future.
That's from Back to the Future 3, as a matter of fact. I think that's. Well, the moment I saw it, I thought, well, that's just one of the funniest things I've ever seen in person, because I never expected to see that of all things.
Yeah, I mean, this will be the second one that I've sold.
You sold the one from 2?
Yeah, and so, I mean, really important. Obviously, one of the most important, other than the hoverboard, probably the most important.
And the shoes.
But those are specific for one movie, right?
Right.
But I would say, like, if you wanted something that was the most important piece other than the car, but the thing that powered the car,
Right.
I mean, it's got to be the most iconic. Without Mr. Fusion, we're not going anywhere, right? So, it's like, I love that. I mean, to me, it's like, I was watching part 3 the other day, and they just get better. I'd forgotten how good it was. I mean,
It's
really,
fun. It's the Western.
really
It's
fun.
charming.
I'd forgotten, but Doc is great. I
He
love
is.
him the old time, and Murray Steenburgen.
He gets a love interest.
I had forgotten how good it was. I used to think, but I actually give it, I give it a thumbs up. It's actually really good. People bash it. I was like, I thought it was good.
People don't bash it. They just don't love it as much as the first one. The second one's so dark. The third
Yeah.
one's so light.
I was pleasantly
jarring.
surprised.
It's very jarring. But that said, this is the superhero case.
Yeah,
Iron Man 3.
Katniss. You have the Hunger Games.
And this is Thor's. I will love this because everyone has come into this room wanted to
Pick it up.
because they want to find out if they're worthy. This is actually the weighted prop hammer. There's 2 hammers in this auction. This is the weighted one.
Yeah, and there's actually even heavier ones. So
The man is worthy.
with all of these props, there are different versions. So this is not the hero, but this would have been something that you would have seen him use a lot because of the weight. So there actually is one that weighs about 50 pounds. That's beautiful. It's machine tooled. The detail is incredible. But when you see him walking around and doing his thing, this is something that's manageable. That they could use. In any type of scene like that. But when you get close up, they cut, insert, and the hero would go in. And then there's one step down from this that's really rough. That that when they're just like running, throwing, dropping, so it's the illusion of Hollywood. But yeah, I mean, it's just Thor. Come on, how cool is that?
I love them. I want the Wonder Woman. Please, by all means. I love the Wonder Woman lasso. For some reason, that's the thing that when I look at this, obviously there's a sort of Athena But to me, there's something.
What do
about
we
that.
need to know about Robert? Let's find out the truth. Is he gonna get me publicity?
The problem is it's wildly boring. But I think there's just something really. This is one of the most iconic pieces with one of the most iconic heroes.
Yeah, going back to Linda Carter, because it all starts with Linda Carter. I mean, this is obviously Gail Godot, but I mean, this, if you watch the show in the 70s, The Lasso of Truth, I mean...
Who watched it in the 70s and yesterday?
Yes. Very cool. The cool factor is high.
It is really
It's
cool.
true. Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
everybody who comes into this room is drawn to a handful of things: the hammer, the lasso,
Yeah, Heimdall's
Katniss's bow.
sword. You know.
Yeah.
But again, the bow is really cool. So I had the Hunger Games auction for all 4 films. Oh God, it must have been 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and I had originally sold this bow. So this is from the 3rd film,
Catching Fire.
Catching Fire, and when the character had gone a little bit more militaristic, and she had a new bow. I actually like the first bow the best, but that's me personally. But this bow is probably the coolest looking bow of all. Again, when you get into like a character like Katniss, this is her signature weapon. This is Mark Hamill's lightsaber. This is Katniss's bow. This is Thor's hammer. These are,
Wonder Woman's sword.
yeah, these are. I would even put Wonder Woman's sword in a different category. I mean, that's like, you know, but Wonder Woman. I would say it would be her costume that'd be more iconic. But when you get into things that are literally character-defining pieces, like this, like that, you know, they're just, that's what collectors want the most, because it's the character. This is her bow. From the first time you meet Katniss hunting to the very end, it's her weapon of choice. It's the bow.
Man, this has been fun. I got to tell you, I've been in this room.
You got 3 more rooms. What are you doing? We're not done yet.
And I wish. Actually, we probably have enough stuff in the auction to fill 10 more rooms.
10 more rooms.
And the 3 they're constructing for us in the back over here.
They're building those for us, so
Yes.
in the future we're going to have lots more stuff. You got to let operations know that we're bringing in just a ton of material.
But what I'm excited, I mean, there is stuff in November that I'm excited to talk about today, but we're not going to.
We can maybe talk about one thing.
Let's wait.
You sure?
Yes, I want to wait.
November's going to be way cool. He is like dying to tell the story, but we have some stuff from Titanic we just got in that's going to blow your mind. I mean, we're talking about DiCaprio, Kate Winslet.
I'm not talking about that stuff.
I'm talking about that stuff. He's jumping the boat here, but I'm talking, we've got Titanic, we've got Michael Jackson, we've got Marilyn Monroe.
Star Trek.
Shh. Tell anybody about Star Trek.
Star Trek.
November, it's going to be epic.
But July 16th, 17th, and 18th is this auction, and the catalog's online, ha.com.
And the
obviously.
catalog is sitting on my desk. It's out. Hopefully you're getting it soon if you haven't got it already.
And if you need a copy of the catalog, email me at robertw@ha.com. That seems to be one of my new jobs here, is sending out catalogs to people who want them.
It's a very good job, pays very well.
It also means that you've stuck around long enough to the entire end of this video, so I know how many people stick around for the Promise Collection. About 300 people asked for catalogs, so we'll see how you do compared to that.
As many catalogs as you need, he'll have. My catalogs are better, so hit him up.
But this has been great. I really appreciate you doing this. Man, you've mazel tov. This is a hell of a sale.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll do this again very, very soon.